Thank you, Cynthia, for helping me with my project. I was wondering if you could maybe introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Cynthia. My last name is Tina, and I'm calling today from Vermont in the US, where I'm currently in the process of building a straw bale passive solar home at an eco village where I live called Headwaters Community. And I am a co director at the Foundation for Intentional Community, as well as I've just finished 5 years of service on the Board of Trustees with the Global Eco-Village Network. So my whole work and life and career is focused around intentional communities, eco-villages. I am a coach, so I help people who want to find and move into intentional communities. I help them find ones that might be a good fit for them. And I also do consulting work for individual community projects more around branding, marketing, communications. So just trying in whatever way possible to support people in learning about and potentially joining or starting or growing intentional community. Mhm.
And what are some of the things that set your community apart from other communities?
The community where I live, Headwaters. Well, we are an intentional community, of course. So, as opposed to the many forms of community that exist in the world, we are a group of people who have come together with a clear intention and explicit values. So, we have a strong focus on permaculture. We grow a lot of our own food. Actually, everyone who lives at Headwaters has built their own home, many with natural building materials. So a really strong ecological focus, as well as a strong focus just on being together, sharing work, enjoying each other's company, kind of just having this community spirit that I think is lacking in a lot of just normal American towns and neighborhoods. Yeah, so that's one of the ways that we're different. And we are an eco-village, so that distinguishes us from a number of different forms of intentional community. Like you have co-housing, you have student co-ops, co-living, all different models, and we are this eco-village model. Yeah.
And I guess with the eco village, you're trying to reduce your impact on the environment and do things sustainably. What are some areas that your eco village has really focused on in terms of like energy, or is it like water, or is it around the food production?
Yeah, it is a lot around the food production. Actually, our full title is Headwaters Garden and Learning Center. Um, so we have a large garden, we have ducks and chickens for egg production. And I think, especially right now with coronavirus and everything going on, we're really wanting to up the ante on our resiliency as a community, especially food wise. And we're fortunate to be in Vermont where there is already a strong local food network. So we're also exploring just how to tap into that network and connect and form wider community resiliency as well.
Uh,
Mhm.
if you had to put a percentage on it, about how self-sufficient would you say you are?
Oh, it's pretty minimal at our community. I don't know. I think in the summer we produce all of our vegetable consumption, but of course during the winter it gets much less. And keep in mind, our community is just one of thousands of communities around the world. So you do have communities that are like close to 100% food self-sufficiency. We're a pretty small group with not so much land, so it's we're getting there. We're working our way towards that.
It sounds like a really a fun and fascinating journey, and getting there helps to build the make the community tighter too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Everyone, like I said, everyone who lives there has built their own home. So it's been wonderful to have their support through the process. And yeah, just having people around who have done it before my neighbor actually is will be the main builder. So he's building his house at the same time he's helping me with my house. It's just this great thing.
Wow. And do you all have like all the different trades that you need to build a full house? You know, the people that can lay the foundation and do the framing and the roofing and the electrical stuff and the everything, or do y'all have to bring in outside people to fill in some of those gaps from time to time?
Oh yeah, certainly we work a lot with the wider area. And we have a number of people who are pretty well skilled. So my neighbor who's helping me with my building project has almost all the skills that we need. But yeah, intentional communities and our community in particular, sometimes people think, oh, there's kind of like these bubbles out there, maybe in the woods or something. But most communities are very permeable, like a lot of interaction with the wider neighborhood or village. And I think that's a good thing because we want to, not have the perception of intentional communities be like, oh, hippies in the woods somewhere. But really, no, this is an um, an attractive way to live that is connected to the mainstream and is accessible.
It's sort of just like an extended family, really.
In some ways, yeah. Yeah.
Um, well, you know, I've been doing a lot of thinking about communities lately, and you know, I mean, right now, I mean, cities have been like all the rage for the past few hundred years. You know, kind of greater and greater concentrations of people. But then, whenever you look at the pandemic and you look at terrorism issues and global war type of thing, and the fact that your biggest cities are probably also your biggest targets, and then like civil unrest and just the fact that living in cities, as you know, the land is more expensive, um, and then with things like worldwide high speed, low latency internet access, allowing for essentially people to live any place and still be connected and work in the global economy. And then you have solar power, which is readily available now, so you don't have to be connected to the grid. And I think you'll have more and more advancements on like water recycling and food production and things like this that really would allow for people to no longer feel the need to live in a city to have like a city-like life. They could essentially be any place. And it just feels like that this is a that we might actually see some time whenever people are moving out of the cities and starting to be less and less populated. And I was wondering if you've seen any of that in the work that you do, and what your thoughts might be.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to watch the trends of populations. I think the majority of the world's population currently lives in cities. So, yeah, there's been this depopulation of the countryside and loss of this more village communal way of life. I think currently with the coronavirus, the pandemic, everything that's going on, we at FIC, the Foundation for Intentional Community, are definitely seeing uptick in interest. I think one of the most popular search terms that people type into Google to find our website right now is like sustainable off-grid community with openings.
Wow.
Uh, yeah. So yeah, and we have this online events sort of workshop series that we do, and our events are just filling up. So yeah, I think it is something where people are seriously considering their lifestyle and who is around them and what their relationship is to place and each other, and wanting that deeper connection and more resiliency in all different ways. Um, so we'll see. I think that these trends and changes take time, but certainly we're seeing a shift, at least in my own work with intentional communities. And even here in Vermont, like a few months ago, when the coronavirus was just starting, people were buying up the land around here. A lot of people from cities buying land, and I think people somehow, there's this security that comes when you're on a piece of land. So I think it's important that we try to make that accessible to as many people as possible. So it's just not the wealthy people who then get to escape the cities and come back to the country, but we, pay attention to how we can make sure that community living can be a vibrant and accessible thing for all groups, as well as not to forget that intentional communities and eco-villages can happen in urban environments as well. So how to help transition cities and suburbs to be more ecologically sustainable, how to adapt them, and form closer community within these environments as well.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're such a commodity consumer type a society where, you don't like the place that you live, you just go and move someplace else. You don't really interact much with your neighbors, and uh, you don't really have strong bonds with the people that you depend on around you. So I could see how a lot of people would really like a sense of community. And
Sure. Yeah. There's this epidemic of loneliness, which has serious health consequences. There's a bunch of statistics you can find on our website, ic.org, intentionalcommunity.org, where it is true that we're living through this period of human evolution where there's a lot of separation, and we evolved as humans to live in communities, in small tribes or smaller groups. And I think our settlement patterns, consumption, all the things you just named have really, caused us to have a breakdown in those connections and sense of belonging that's so vital to our health and well-being. So yeah, intentional community is one pathway towards helping to bring that back. And of course, there's many other pathways and things that people can do if they're not quite able to up and move to a community or start one on their own.
yeah, indeed. I mean, I have a friend. He was talking about trying to buy a piece of property and set up a community as well for some families. So it's just kind of interesting seeing that. But one of the things that of particular interest of me is this idea that humanity might eventually expand beyond the Earth, and that we actually be able to create communities on the Moon and Mars, the moons of Jupiter, the moons of Saturn, and what have you. And I was trying to imagine, who on Earth today would even be closely able to adapt to such a place, because I mean, this is a place where voluntary simplicity and poverty, you may be in a high-tech environment, but you're not going to have all of the creature comforts that you would expect. And in an extremely harsh and hostile environment where one little misstep is really the difference between life and death. And I was just, and how do you actually take society? I mean, because I like think about my daily life, the energy production, and then the house I live in, and the food that I consume, and all these. And if you trace that back to the network of people involved in that, I mean, we're probably looking at millions and millions of people, which, to try to take that system and close it off and then transport it someplace is impractical. But it seems to me that some of the eco-villages and intentional communities where they're seeking, really high levels of self-sufficiency might be a good testing ground for eventual people that would populate these communities off Earth. And I was wondering, based upon, your work with intentional communities and that description, if you thought that was thinking about in the right direction, or if you thought maybe that there's more that needs to be considered.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating thought experiment, certainly. Um, uh, well, let's see. I do have a number of thoughts. The first thing, though, that has come to mind is I don't know if you're familiar with the Biosphere 2.
Absolutely. In fact, I got to go
Yeah,
visit it 2 years ago, and I remember reading about it. I think I was probably in junior high, and I was just like, "Whoa, that's so cool!" It's a shame it didn't quite become everything we hoped it would be, but yes, yes, I'm
cool.
familiar with it.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the whole story and like how it ended, but I think this idea is kind of what you're getting at, like a community that is really settling this place in harsh conditions and needing to have a high degree of communication, group decision making, strong group culture. Um, because yeah, it's interesting. I have a friend who's a permaculture teacher. Her name's Jillian Hovey, and she says that in a community, it's rarely the gray water system that's broken. So we can have all this fancy technology, but it's always going to be the human factor where things could go awry. And that's why the most valuable technologies that intentional communities are creating and experimenting with, practicing, is around how to be together and how to function well. So, communication, group decision making, conflict resolution, these sort of social skills or soft skills are really valuable. Um, so yeah, I think in terms of like a group going out and settling some other place, this would be of value. I have to say though, I'm a little, uh, I don't know how responsible it is to really put too much of our energy or resources into inhabiting faraway planets when we're not taking really good care of this planet, our own home. And so I kind of feel like that those resources and intelligence and creativity could be put to better use, you know, supporting the cleaning up, the healing, restoration, regeneration of this planet where we are currently living. And I think intentional communities can bring some value to that as well, because we have this definition for what an intentional community is, and it's a group of people who are sharing resources and share explicit common values. And I think that values piece is so essential to the formation of communities and really the possible formation of a different culture, and one that is different from the mainstream society, Western European inherited culture of colonialization and materialism, consumption, all of this. So if an intentional community were to offer its skills to support in this very long distance future of inhabiting other planets, we'd want to make sure that the values and the intention there is really like super clear and in alignment with yeah, who we want to be as a humanity going forward.
Yeah, I'd like to probe a little bit into your thought about the need to direct all that creativity and resources towards taking care of the earth. And just want to run a few things by you. One is some people have said, you know, if we mess up the earth, then we could just go move someplace else. I think whoever says those types of things, either they know something I don't, or they have no clue about what other options are available, because we've literally sent probes to every significant thing in the solar system, and Earth is by far the absolutely best place. In fact, it is hard to imagine messing up the Earth to the point that one of those other places become better, because essentially it'd just be better just to colonize the Earth in some type of sealed environment than actually going to those other places. So when it comes to protecting the Earth and making Earth work, there is no plan B. So space is definitely not an option in that standpoint from myself. But I was wondering if you had heard of Jeff Bezos, that he had a space company. I don't. Everybody knows he has Amazon, but he also has a space company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell me more.
Well, it's called Blue Origin. Um, Jeff Bezos went to school at Princeton, and there was a professor there that was really big into developing space settlements, and he really caught the space bug from that. And Jeff actually talks about how he thinks his work in Blue Origin is actually more important than his work in Amazon. And he likes to say that what he wants to do is basically take all those earth-warming activities like um, energy production and mining and heavy industrial processing and create the capability of moving them off of Earth and then basically turning Earth into residential garden, that type of thing. So that's sort of his vision with regards to space. He likes to say that space is for working, Earth is for living. And I was just wondering if that vision was more in line with kind of like your views.
Okay, I hadn't thought about this before. So the idea is that we would use these other planets or other, space basically, for resources and materials and production, and then have Earth be more of a residential. Is this it? Kind of?
Exactly, a place, a refuge for life, both human and non-human life.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, because one of the trends that Jeff likes to talk about is that at the way that we're increasing our energy consumption, I mean, you could not even cover the Earth with enough solar panels that you would need like for 100 years from now if we continue at the same rate we are.
Mm.
Um, and yet, the sun produces so much energy in all directions, the Earth actually gets very, very little of it. And there's some other studies that have been done about, there appears to be the materials on the moon to actually be able to manufacture solar panels. So you can actually manufacture the solar panels on the moon, put them in orbit around the Earth, and then maybe beam the energy down to Earth. Or one thought I had was maybe even use the energy in space, because a large part of our usage of energy has to do with data centers and what have you. Why not have the data center in orbit and just use the energy right there? You don't have to even beam it. But so that's one thought.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, it's very interesting idea. Feels quite futuristic for me, but yeah, I don't know. I guess personally, I would favor a direction that looks something like reducing our consumption. And just sort of keeping in mind that humans have been around for 200,000 years or more, and we've been living in pretty sustainable ways, obviously with a much lower density of people. But I think it is possible to have a fulfilling and rich life without nearly as much resource consumption that we have today. And that's the cool thing about a lot of eco-villages in particular. Like you could look at Dancing Rabbit Eco-Village in Missouri. They've done a lot of research tracking very closely their carbon footprint. And I don't know the exact percentage off the top of my head, but it's something like a significant reduction in their energy use and material consumption compared to the mainstream. So I think this idea that like everyone needs to own their own washing machine and lawnmower and car, uh, that's not the things that we really need to live meaningful lives. So I say all that, and here we are using computers to talk to each other from our different parts of the planet. And I think that I'd love to see a future where we can take the best of like all of the technology and innovation that we've come up with, like the best of the future and the best of the past, and turn it into something that works in the present. Um, so this is kind of something that would feel more in alignment with kind of my values and understanding of the world and the planet and what would be best for the planet. It's just, I don't like this idea that then we go off and like extract from another place. It, like, I think I want to believe that it's possible that we can come into a place of homeostasis and regeneration, even like here on this planet.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it's difficult to kind of. I mean, could you describe that a little bit more? Like, what does that homeostasis and regenerative state look like? I mean, like, if you had to describe it to a visitor from the current world, uh, what, how would you describe it? How would you be able to bridge, um, make it understandable?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Well, there's a lot to it, but one of the places to start would be regenerating our soils and trying to bring all of this carbon that we've released into the atmosphere that's causing global warming, climate change, and putting it back into the soils where it can be supporting life. So regenerative agricultural practices such as rotational grazing, organic farming, taking these big monoculture farms and bringing back the small scale, more close connection with earth and the place. I think that's one of the major shifts in terms of how we produce our food and how we bring back the soils. And hopefully that helps with the looming environmental crisis of climate change, as well as protecting and preserving our existing intact ecosystems. So that's, for me, really critical. And then I think it's going to look like a lot more sharing. Like I had mentioned earlier, like not everyone needing to own all of their own appliances, maybe not everyone having their own home. And it's certainly possible. Like I think in the United States, we have developed a lot of our infrastructure and our cities and our towns around the automobile. And so we have houses that are really spread out, and you have to drive from point A to point E. You need to drive just to like go to the grocery store, you know, to get your basic needs met. So I'd love to see that settlement pattern shifting so that we can be more living on a human scale and less dependent on transportation. And not to say that people wouldn't still travel, but maybe it would look a little slower. Yeah, so these are some of the elements. I think living in closer knit, more resilient communities where there's a higher degree of sharing involved, and we have a strong focus on restoring the ecosystem damage that we have caused and putting carbon back into the earth. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you say resonates and completely agrees with some of the things I've been thinking too. I mean, our entire society seems to be geared and seems to value an ever increasing appetite for consuming things and eating through things, as opposed to really considering what the purpose of those things were to begin with and really focusing on that. Have you ever read the book Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yeah, I've read like the first half of it. I get the premise.
Well, my favorite part is literally the first page of it, where he's like talking about how, you know, uh, you know, the people of our planet were so primitive, they thought digital watches were cool. And but some of them said that, you know, they really shouldn't have come down from the trees, and others said they really shouldn't have come out of the oceans, because most of the people were unhappy most of the time, even those with digital watches. And most of the solutions had to do with moving around green pieces of money, which was odd because the green pieces of money, you know, were perfectly happy or something like that. You know, it's just like, um, you know, we've like created solutions to problems, and then like the solutions have taken on a life of their own, and we forgot about what the original purpose of those things were. I mean, a good example is money. I guarantee you that people really think that money is actually something, but it's absolutely nothing unless you can exchange it for food, for housing, for energy, for all these things. And whenever you start thinking about that, then you realize you really don't want the money, you want those other things. But yet, for some reason, we've we've conceptualized and created an artificial view of our world where it's taken on a whole new uh, a life of its own that's completely, I mean, you just have to look at the economy versus the stock market right now if you wanted a good example. Mm. um, but the other thing about the sharing, I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, if you look at my neighborhood, there's probably on this street of mine, I think something like 20 houses. Each one of them probably owns like 2 cars at least, probably 2 to 3. So I mean, that's like 40 to 50 cars, right? And I guarantee you that those cars are probably only used on average like maybe 2% of the time. So you know, why do you need so many cars? Or, and I guarantee you, most of the houses have you know, a lawnmower, a edger, a blower, which only gets used, you know, for a few hours every other week. Whenever we probably all could share one and be just as happy, if not happier. In fact, we could get two. One could be primary, another one could be a backup. You know, and uh, you know, but so that's 100% true. And I guess whenever you look at that, then your need to consume goes way down, and you also create these bonds between your neighbors because you're like, hey, I don't mind, you know, mowing your grass today. Maybe you could go for our lawns, you know, and you like have like this little thing going on. So.
Maybe we turn all the lawns into food producing gardens.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a fig tree in the backyard, and up until like for the past month, it's been producing a yogurt container of figs a day. And it's
Whoa.
just like so fun to go out there and get them. I think by the end of this month, I want to be figged out for the rest of the year, uh, uh, it's really good. Yeah. No, definitely.
Where, where are you
Uh,
living?
Houston, Texas.
Houston, Texas. Okay, nice.
But I lived in Exeter, New Hampshire for 1 year. Then the snows came, and I knew I had to move back. But anyway, that's.
Gotcha. Yeah. Mm.
Um, Yeah, so that's, but I have a question. So some observations. So in December 25th, um, 1968, Apollo 8, 3 astronauts go around the moon. They're taking pictures of the moon. They're all excited to be there. And they look up and they see Earth, you know, and they're like, wow. And they take that picture, that iconic picture of Earthrise, where you have Earth is a fragile ball in the distance. And you know, by 1970, we have our first Earth Day. The EPA is created. You know, there's really the environmental movement really starts to kick in, and I'm sure there's a lot of factors that go into it. But I think for many people, seeing everything that they've known uh, in such a and realizing that it's all really finite, fragile, um, precious, a whole bunch of other different adjectives you could throw at it. But I think that view, you know, if we could keep that in mind as opposed to our daily view that we have of the earth, I mean, in my daily existence, the earth feels huge and indestructible and limitless. But when you get that perspective from further out, from around the moon, and you see it with like the thin atmosphere, and you know, I know Armstrong said whenever he was on the moon, he could hold up his thumb and cover up the entire moon with his thumb. And people are like, "Wow, that must have made you feel really big." And he's like, "No, it actually made me feel really, really small." Um, and I was just wondering how much of our current problems deal with kind of a misperception of how fragile and big the Earth is.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Well, what an incredible gift of this whole space program, space experiment to have that image of the Earth, to really see it. Um, I'm not sure we needed the image. I think if we really try to pause and be quiet and reflect and spend some time in nature, we have that sense of that image, what that image gives us just inherently. Because we are nature. Like we came from nature. We are the evolution just unfolding through this experiment of humanity. Um, so yeah, this separation, the disconnect from each other, like we've been talking about in communities, that is also true when we think about ourselves as separate from nature or separate from the environment in which we inhabit and we are dependent on in so many ways. And I like to think that the planet is resilient. Like millions of years from now, when we're no longer here, the planet's going to be fine and probably doing better than the way it is now. Um, and it's really us who need to shift to this awareness, like you're saying, of the fragility and the power, and make sure that we are not over extracting and depleting and destroying these beautiful life forms that have taken so long to evolve and are disappearing so quickly. And it is just absolutely tragic. And just to try to stay hopeful that we can we've gone close to the edge of the destruction side of this path, and it's time for a U-turn, I think, towards something that is more sustainable with all of the great gifts that we have been able to acquire through this pathway into technology and consumption and all of the civilization that we have created. Like, thank you for that. And now we have this awareness and we can make different choices going forward, I hope.
Yeah, I think another aspect of it is in today's life, you don't really own the full cycle of your existence. Like you go to the store, you buy your fruits and your vegetables and your meats and your made products. You come home, you eat them. You put the waste in the curb, it magically disappears every Monday and Thursday, depending upon where you live. And so you have like this little window of the process, and you have no visibility to what's happening before, and you have no visibility to what's happening afterwards. And I feel like, if people got to see the entire first of all, if we had a closed loop process, that would be good. But if people got to see the entire upstream and downstream of their existence, I think they would make different choices. And I feel like that eco villages uh, is a step in that direction to be able to see the full process.
Yeah, certainly for a community that is growing and processing their own food, not only vegetables, but also animals. And I think, when you can process your own chicken or cow, you have this totally different relationship with meat and eating meat. Um, So yeah, certainly, being able to get your hands dirty in the soil, you have this really felt sense for life and what it takes to produce life that then gets to feed your life, and how it is all a cycle. And I think especially for young people and children, this is such a gift to be able to give them that understanding, because the kids are going to grow up to be the leaders that'll then get the opportunity, hopefully, to make decisions going forward. So, so yeah, definitely. Mhm.
So, just looking out into like the far future, do you think that ultimately human existence will only be on the Earth, or do you see at some point humanity being able to extend itself beyond the Earth? I mean, like, uh, I know there's a question about being good stewards and kind of figuring out how to protect the Earth, but kind of putting that question aside and assuming that we're able to answer it, solve that. Would you see then, like the ultimate destiny of humanity moving out into this universe, or do you kind of see us always being contained here on Earth?
Oh, that's such a good question. Hmm. Well, I don't know. I think for me, it comes back to why, that question of why and the intention behind it. Um, like, okay, let's imagine a far future. We've figured out how to be sustainable here and regenerate this earth. Yeah, maybe we are able to, in a sustainable fashion, do some research and discovery. I think this human curiosity to learn about the place in which we inhabit is a strong driver. I think my concern is that this drive to expand and in some ways conquer or colonize, like the manifest destiny, like I don't know how much that idea resonates with me. I don't think um, it is our destiny or purpose even as humans to go forth and populate. um, yeah, that doesn't really sit with me because I think that we can go out by going in too, like, and not to think that there's a different value in being contained or being outward or expansive. Um, yeah, I don't know. And I also, maybe part of me just feels like we have so much work to do here. Like we have such a long ways to go that maybe it's just a bit hard for me to imagine the day in which we could do that in a truly integral and responsible way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess on the outside of it, a few billion years from now, assuming our astronomers are right, the sun, will expand, engulfing sort of the Earth, and that's the end of the Earth, all life on it and everything. So that's several billion years away, and we have a lot of urgent problems now. But obviously, hopefully at some point we can solve those problems. Is there, I mean, is it, and we look to have the capacity now to preserve that life and to expand it to other parts of the solar system and to have it go on, to be able to be an unnatural force to preserve nature. It's kind of interesting. And I was wondering, assuming we were able to take care of the problems here, would, and we had the capability of sort of allowing for that life to continue beyond the life of our sun, would you see a need to kind of protect it, or like a Noah's Ark type of situation? Just wondering um, what your
Um,
thoughts were.
so you mean imagining a future that we're going out and settling other planets that we would always want to protect Earth? Or maybe I didn't understand the question fully.
So it's a big question if we could get there to begin with, but several billion years from now, the Earth will no longer be inhabitable by anybody because the sun would have expanded out and consumed it essentially. Um, and I'm just wondering if we have the capability to take the life on Earth and civilization and what have you, and be able to preserve it beyond our current um, time of being able to live here on Earth and our sun. Would you see that as being something? I mean, would you see us as I mean, I guess there's really sort of two choices. One choice number one is we die with the earth, and choice number two is we're able to preserve life and civilization and consciousness by being able to branch out to the rest of the universe somehow.
Oh,
Which of those two choices would you feel more comfortable making?
I see. Like it's like the Wall-E movie, right? This is what
Well,
I'm imagining.
except in the Wall-E movie, that was the Earth was still around. We just destroyed it. You know, in this situation, it's the Earth is being destroyed by natural events. In which case, it's the sun entering that phase of its existence and consuming.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there is this human drive for self-preservation, and I like to think that there was a meaning and purpose for our existence. And so, if there is a way that we can figure out how to continue that and it's still creating a good quality of life for the people who are living, um, yeah, I guess why not? I think there would be a lot of people out there who would want to choose to continue in some form. Um, yeah, I don't know. Interesting. I think there's, yeah, a lot of questions around what that might look like. Mm.
Yeah, and who knows what form we take in a billion years from now, too.
Yeah.
I
Wow.
mean, all of humanity might get reduced down to like a single server, and then nature goes along, and we're just like essentially spirits
Yeah.
observing. And um, so a couple of more questions before we run out of time. If it was safe and affordable, would you have any interest in going into space yourself?
Hmm. Wow, I've never thought about this. If it was safe and affordable, would I want to go into space myself? Safe and affordable. Um, I would add another criteria: safe, affordable, and environmentally friendly. Why not? I'd be curious.
And would you see yourself just going on like a suborbital flight, just peaking above the atmosphere and coming back down in, less than an hour? Or would you see yourself like spending a week in orbit, just observing the Earth and being in free fall? Or maybe more adventurous, like a couple of week trip to the moon and back, or really adventurous and spend multiple years going to Mars and back? Like how how far would your adventure extend?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I am definitely a traveler. I've been fortunate to travel around the world, visiting all these eco villages and intentional communities. So I think I would want to make a longer jaunt, probably not a few years in length. That feels a little too long. Yeah, but yeah, a few months. If it was safe, affordable, environmentally friendly. Sounds cool.
Yeah, I think safe, affordable, and responsible is like the
Sure.
third one, right? That would be. Um, okay, and the question I usually start out with, but I was really more interested in your views on kind of like the future of humanity and intentional communities and that type of thing. So I kind of skipped over it. But I was wondering, did you know that NASA was planning to send people to the moon in 2024?
I think I learned about it on your website.
Okay, and that's true with the vast majority of people I talk to. So it's
Okay.
kind of interesting. Well, was there any topic that we didn't get to talk about that you wanted to?
Um, mm, mm. I could just share with folks if they are curious about intentional communities. I could share some resources for them.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's my website, cynthiatina.com, and you can learn more about me. And if you want to, like, if you're really interested in finding an intentional community to move to, I do have that coaching service. And then there's ic.org, and we have a online and also a print book directory of around 1,500 intentional communities, mostly in North America, but around the world. We have online events and workshops on community building skills, books, and classifieds advertisement program as well. So it's like a really great resource. And then also ecovillage.org has a map of ecovillages. Cohousing.org has a map of co-housing communities. So if you're really like just curious to dive into this world of intentional community, it's super fascinating. It's not at all something where I'm thinking that everyone should up and move to a community, but more so these are incredible experimentation centers for how we could do life differently. And there might be some interesting things that then we could take from those places and yeah, bring out into the wider world as well. So hope folks feel inspired to contact me if they'd like.
That is really awesome. And I really appreciate the work that you did. I signed up for your Finding Community workshop last week. So that was really good.
Good.
Well, Cynthia, I really appreciate your time. I'll go ahead and stop the recording then.
Okay. Thank you, Nathan.